morning, everyone. So I'm starting by casting on for one of the cap sleeves. Maybe I'll do a long tail cast on. 100 stitches. Should be plenty. Let's see. Let's see if I can gauge it correctly. So to calculate the stitches, because basically I've decided I'm gonna try a short sleeve, okay? And so obviously the pattern is written for a long sleeve, so the number of stitches you cast on is for the wrist. I actually want to cast on the amount for the fullest part of the bicep. So I've basically read ahead in the pattern to where you're done with all the sleeve increases, and it says you'd have 101 stitches. Well, I'm gonna cast on 100 because 100 is divisible by 4. Which means I can do my corrugated ribbing and it will go into that evenly. And I might not, I think I'm gonna need more slack for this. So I'm gonna do a long tail cast on just because I like it. I didn't on the body. On the body I did just a normal cable cast on, but I like a long tail cast on when I can, and for 100 stitches I think that's doable. The body was quite a lot more stitches, so I didn't on the body, but I think it's doable for the sleeves. So what I'm thinking is I will do a short amount of corrugated ribbing, not as much as on the body because it's quite deep on the body, and so for the bicep I'm thinking maybe like an inch at most. And then I'll do a bit of the Fair Isle pattern. And then as I'm doing, basically immediately start then the cap shaping. So I'm really only doing like the sleeve cap. So some people do their long tail cast on one-handed. I'm not quite that. I mean, I can do it. I know theoretically how you do it. You sort of, this is the long tail end here. This is the long tail end. This is the end attached to the ball. And I believe you sort of hold them in kind of a Y formation like that. And you go under that one. There's a way of doing it. I have managed to do it in the past, but normally I do it two-handed. It's just easier. So for those of you who haven't done a long tail cast on, the idea is you make a backwards loop on the needle. So I do that by... This is one of those things where once you have the muscle memory down, it's actually kind of hard to explain to people. So you do a backwards loop on the needle, and then you sort of knit it from that position with that, and then you put the loop over. And you get a very nice, you can see it's sort of like, it looks like a little rope edge. You're effectively doing a backwards loop cast on and knitting the first row at the same time. And so once you get the hang of it, this making the backwards loop, wool goes around like you're knitting, and then the loop goes over and off. You can do it quite quickly. Notice I'm trying to keep it not too tight. You know, casting on, you don't want to have a tight cast on. I could use a bigger needle for the cast on. That would be one option. But instead I'm just consciously keeping it loose as I do the cast on. You know, if you have trouble pushing your first row of stitches over the needle, you've probably done your cast on way too tight. And you notice I'm casting on onto a circular needle. I'm going to knit these in the round. That's the other thing I'm changing. You know, the pattern is obviously knit flat and sewn up. Back at that, I am going to knit them in the round. Obviously, it will very quick, as soon as I do the ribbing, I will then switch to going back and forth for the sleeve cap because it has to be sewn in. Should I do it in the round? Yes. Damn it. I'm definitely doing it in the round. I can't, like... Too annoying not to. I toyed with the idea of picking up and knitting set-in sleeves. There is a method you can pick up around the armhole and knit set-in sleeves using short rows. But if I go from the top down, that means the stitches will be upside down. And I feel like in a one-color jumper you wouldn't notice that, but I feel like in this pattern you actually might. So I'm not gonna do that. It's nicer to not have to sew it in, to be honest with you, but. How many do I have now? Just count. There's my stitch markers. What I normally end up doing is putting a stitch marker like every 50, just so that, especially if you're having to cast on a lot, like for a body. And that way, you only have to count the groups. Just double check that that is 50. Okay. That's another 30, so I got 20 more to go. Okay. All right. I overestimated slightly on my tail. That's how much tail I had left, but you know what? It's pretty good considering for a long tail. Yeah, I know people have like rubrics for guessing how much you need in the tail, like 1 inch per stitch or something like that. I don't know. I just kind of eyeball it. Two, 44, 46, 48, 50. All right, we got 50 stitches. I'm going to use magic loop for this. So you see I'm using a single circular needle. So the way we get set up for knitting in the round with magic loop, what I'm going to do is around halfway around about where I had that stitch marker-ish, I'm going to pinch between 2 stitches and pull the cable out. So I'm just pulling that loop of cable out. So you see now I've got, this cable's kind of kinked up, so it's a little tricky to see. Got like half the stitches on one needle and half the stitches on the other. And now the key is to make sure you're not twisted. So the way I generally do that is making sure that cast on edge is all along the inside. You see it? The sort of ridge of stitches. You know, if I have it, let's say if I have that bottom one, you see how there's a twist in that bottom needle? If I knit it like that, I end up with a Mobius strip. There is no way to fix it. It is unfixable. So you literally just have to pull it apart and start over again. So for example, when I started the body of the jumper, which was, you know, hundreds of stitches, it's not easy to make sure you have no twists around hundreds of stitches. I actually had my husband help me. You know, we sort of were holding it in place to ensure that it wasn't twisted. All right, so it's not twisted there. Let me pull out my working yarn. So I'm actually going to be knitting now. So there's the working yarn. I've got the working yarn coming off the back needle. So I'm going to be knitting the stitches on the front needle. Now you can do some things here where you like, let me grab a third needle. You know, I can do the trick where I transfer the stitch off the back needle to the front needle and the stitch off the front needle through that stitch to the stitch on the back needle. That can help sort of lock the round in place. If I can get my needle through that one, come on. So put that stitch on the back needle. Basically, I'm joining to knit in the round at this point. Oh, except I split that one. Don't split. Okay. All right, so I've swapped the last two stitches on each needle, basically. And I've pulled the first stitch through the last stitch. Just, again, we're now knitting in the round. So I'm going to be knitting the stitches on the front needle. So I'm going to pull the back needle through. So I've got enough slack to knit with. And I'm ready to knit. I'm doing a knit 2, purl 2. This will make more sense once I get going. It's tricksy the first time you do it. This the first row of getting started knitting in the round is the hardest. So I'm doing knit 2, purl 2. So knit 1, knit 2, move it to the front, purl 2. And then I'll just tighten up that first stitch by pulling on my cast on. Okay. All right, knit 2. I'm gonna do some knit 2, purl 2 ribbing for just 2 rounds, I think. And then we bring in the gray. And I'm gonna do a trick on the gray. Could have used a longer needle for, if you're gonna do magic loop, using like an 80 centimeter circular is a bit easier than this. I think this is a 60. And 80 will give you a little bit more room to maneuver, but I'm only gonna be going in the round for an inch or so. I'm knitting with the tail. No! Well, that's not gonna work. We tink. How did I not notice I was doing that? Tink it back. That's why I left too long of a tail. Back to the beginning. Okay. Now, let's actually knit with the working end of wool. Damn it. Make sure we're not twisted. I think we are actually twisted. There we go. All right. Now actually knitting with the working ball of wool. Take 2. So we're going in a spiral effectively. So, you know, we're and that first bit where you sort of start the second row of the spiral, the first round of your knitting is always the hardest part. Once you get it going, well, then you just keep knitting. So remember, the key on ribbing, especially if you're a beginner and you're wondering why you get your stitch number wrong when you're ribbing, is to always move the working wool back and forth between the needles to be where you need it to be. So here I'm ready to do 2 knits. So I do 1 knit, 2 knits. If I just purl from this position, let me change to the closer. So if I just immediately purl from this position, so put the needle in and then try and purl, because the wool is on the back side, when I make the purl stitch and pull it through, I actually create an extra loop on the needle. Can you see it there in between those 2 stitches? I've increased. It's called a yarn over. And sometimes when you're doing lace, you want that. But right now I don't. It's gonna mean I have extra stitches when I come back, and it's gonna make holes. So we don't want to do that. So when you're knitting, the wool is in the back, and when you're purling, the wool's in the front. And since the wool's not in the front now, all I do is move it between the needle tips to be where I need it to be. Now when I do my purl, it only makes the 1 stitch. So done my 2 purls to go back to knitting. Again, I move it back to the back. So you just have to constantly, whenever you switch from a knit to a purl, move the wool back to where you need it to be. You know, when I was working in a knitting shop, the number of times someone would come in trying to make like a ribbed scarf and they had a triangle because, you know, occasionally when they were switching from a knit to a purl, they would forget to do that. They'd create extra stitches. And so their piece was widening, you know, as they went along. And it was full of holes. So sometimes a pattern will tell you to do this. You'll see YF, yarn front, or YB, yarn back. It just means move the yarn to that part of the work, to that side. And we say front, we mean the side, the bit facing you, and back is the bit away from you. Okay, so I've done the first needle. So I'm just gonna spread those stitches out, and then I flip it around the other way. That's my tail. Here what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna sort of wind my tail up a bit so I don't accidentally, maybe I tie a bow in it or something. Just something here, I'll wind around it. There we go, just so I don't accidentally pick it up. Okay, so there's my working wool. Always set up yourself so that the working wool's coming off the back needle. That's where I need it to be. Then I move the stitches along on the front needle because that's the stitches I'm gonna knit next. So if you get mixed up when you're doing the, either with 2 circulars or with a magic loop, just always make sure when you're starting a row, that working wool's coming off the back needle. And then you're gonna knit the stitches on the front needle. And so I just did, those were 2 purls, so I'm ready to do 2 knits. Now, one of the tricks here is if you have to get interrupted, someone starts talking to you, or you put your wool down for the night, you're knitting down, you forget which one you're on. Are you doing your knits or are you doing your purls? You got to learn to read your knitting. And by reading it, I mean looking at the stitches on the needle and telling what they are. So if I look at this needle now that you can see here, you see some of these stitches have a bump at the bottom. See, these 2 have a bump. These 2 don't. These 2 have a bump. The bumps are the purls. So if you see a horizontal bar or a bump at the bottom of the stitch, that was a purl stitch. So if I set this down, went to the bathroom, got a glass of water, whatever, come back, I can tell the bumps, those were purls. So I'm ready for knits next. So a knit is a V, and a purl will have a horizontal bump at the bottom of it, which is actually the bottom of the stitch below it. The more knitting you do, the more comfortable you get reading your knitting. Okay. And it should end up with 4 here at the end, which I do, because that's 100 divisible by 4. So that's good, I counted right. And once you've done the first row, it's a little easier to double check that you didn't have any twists. So let's go ahead and pull the stitches onto the loop, and let's just double check now. There we go. No twists. No twists. That's good. All right. Working wool coming off the back needle. That's right. And now we're going to introduce the gray for the corrugated ribbing. So corrugated ribbing, let me grab the actual garment here. So this is the corrugated ribbing at the bottom. And so I feel like, did I do? I feel like I did 2 rows before. It's fun. Right, okay, just checking the pattern, making sure I know what I'm doing. All right, so gray. I don't have a lot of the gray left. I hope this is gonna work. I have a feeling I'm gonna have to try and find some more, because I've still got to do around the neckline as well. Okay, working wool's coming off the back needle. Move the stitches on the front along. So the way corrugated ribbings works is I would be doing the knit stitches in the camel color and the purl stitches in the gray color. However, if I just immediately start like that, I get a funny sort of blip of color when I start the purls. So I'm actually going to do a trick. I'm going to do the whole first row knitting. I'm going to do 2 knits, and then I'm going to start the gray. And I'm actually going to do the first row of the gray as a knit. I'll do it as a purl and I'll show you what I mean. So imagine I was joining this in, doing the purls. I'll show you why. Okay, and then I move the yarn to the back. You see that? You see how I get the horizontal bar ends up in the previous color. So I would have that little sort of ugly dot of color on the front of the sweater, which I don't want. So if you're doing corrugated ribbing and you get that, you know, it's like when you're doing stripes and garter stitch or something, or reverse stockinette, you get that sort of blip. So the easy way to avoid the blip is to do the first row as a knit. So instead of doing the first gray stitches as a purl, I'm going to do them as a knit. This first round then is just going to be knitting all the way around in alternating camel and gray. So I'm going to hold the gray in my left hand and the camel in my right. And see, this way I don't get the blip at the bottom of the gray stitches. So you can do 2 colors, 1 color in each hand. You can actually, if you're dexterous enough, you can hold both colors in the one hand and just swap around which one you need. Just make sure, notice I'm keeping the gray on the bottom each time, so I'm not twisting them around each other as I use them. Always making sure the gray is being carried underneath the camel. And this is, I don't get that ugly blip of color. Don't twist them. Take the camel on. But what I mean on top is if I turn it around, you see on the back, turn it right side up. The gray floats are underneath the camel floats. They're physically lower on the garment. That's what we want. I want to keep them always in the same orientation. It'll look nicer. It'll look more consistent. And I'm treating the camel as the background color. And so my sort of personal rule is I always carry the background color on top and the accent color underneath. And there's some sort of theories about why you should do it that way. The color that comes from underneath technically will pop a little bit more on the front of the garment. I've seen where people have knitted swatches and changed it up, and you can tell. And one looks slightly nicer than the other. Okay, there's the gray. Okay, we get to the end of the row. To the end of the row, pull on your loop, flip them around the other way. Except I get it upside down. There we go. So the wool's coming off the back needle. Back needle, and then I'm gonna knit the front needle. So squish them along. And I just did the two gray, so I'm ready to do the two camel. Now I'm gonna be careful here, just at the join between the two needles, of making sure I don't like trap my working wool. I'm gonna sort of lift it out of the way so that when I pull my cable through, it's not like coming around the cable or anything like that. All right, ready for the camel stitches. I'm going to be very careful with this first one not to pull it too tight because there's a float across the two gray stitches. So I want to give it a little bit of a tug, but not too tight, just to get it going on this needle. I don't want to have a ladder where those two needles are joining, basically, you know, because I want to keep the consistency across that corner. I'm going to keep the tension basically the same as elsewhere. It'll be easier to see once I get going a few more rows. First few rows are always tricky. So it's not really ribbing at the moment. It's just, oh, hang on, I nearly twisted them there. Camel on top. It's not really ribbing at present. It's just two color knitting. Next row we will actually start ribbing again. Come on. I know someone on an earlier stream was sort of blown away by the magic loop because they thought it was some sort of arcane magic, and all it is you're using a circular needle and you're just pulling a loop out between a couple of stitches. Like, there's no other trick to it. And you just pretend they're really separate needles. What am I doing? Don't get them twisted. Oh, hi Fuzzy. Thanks for the follow. I wondered who was watching. That's nice of you. Hope you're having a lovely Valentine's Day wherever you are. Or not, if you prefer not. Okay, I'm nearly to the end here, and then we will actually truly start doing corrugated ribbing with pearls. Right. So again, the whole trick of that was to avoid that blip of color when I start the gray, and now I've got the gray. It doesn't have a bump of the camel at the bottom of the gray. The gray starts clean. Okay, flip this around the other direction. Wool's coming off the back needle. Move the wool around. Oh, I hate this cable needle. All right. Again, make sure the working wool isn't captured. All right, ready for the knits. Knit 2. All right, now we're ready to purl 2 with the gray. So I'm going to take the gray around to in between the needles, and now it's in the right place to actually do the purls. Now that first one is loose just because that's where I started the wool, so I'll pull the tail just to tighten that first stitch up a bit. Okay. Knit 2. Just to get myself sorted out here. Okay, I'll keep going using the one hand method just to show you. So I'll switch back to the purl. So the gray comes around to the front. Do my 2 purls. Gray goes to the back. I switch to the camel. Knit 2. Back to the gray to the front. Purl 2. Gray to the back. Switch to the camel. Knit 2. Back to the gray, purl 2. And so I'm now getting my column of gray purls, but I don't have that blip. Now the other way, if you don't want to use one hand, the other way to do it is to use 2 hands. And you can do the trick where you loop the gray yarn. I'm looping it around my neck, so it's sort of held at a little bit of tension. So now, I can do my 2 knits. And now to do the purls, I just kind of make sure that is in the front, and then I twang it over. This is a way of doing continental knitting with, if you're not good, if you hold the working wool in your right hand. And I just need to make sure that the gray is constantly going to the back when it's not in use. So it's not in use now. Do my 2 knits. Twang the gray for the purls. Whoops. Like doing 2-color ribbing, look, it is awkward. It's not awkward. You just find the way that's most comfortable for you. This works for me. That's the last two. Okay. From around my neck. There's our first row of corrugated ribbing, proper corrugated ribbing. Looking good. What size needle am I using? That's 3.75. What size is this? This is like a 4, isn't it? What is a 4? No, I don't want to use the 4. 3.75 is good. I have some other needle tips around here somewhere. That must have been what I was doing. I'm just trying to remember what size I knitted the body on. I'm pretty sure. No, I'm kind of like, because that's not the interchangeables. I was using the interchangeables on the body. Aha! Damn it. Maybe I need to do this on a smaller needle. That's one of the tips. Where's the other tip? There it is. Which size is this? I just got my knitting bag put on my chair. Which size are these? Because I'm just thinking I need it to be fairly tight. Oh, these are 3.75s as well. That's the same size. That's the same size. 3.75. And I'm using 3.75. It's fine. Not going to make a difference. I was worried I was using the wrong size needle, but all good. Okay. Working wool coming off the back needle. And then I'm just going to slide the stitches on the front needle along. Maybe I'll switch to doing, I'll use the 2 circulars method. Because then I don't have to fight with these cables so much. And I do have 2 needles the same size. So if you want to use 2 circulars, you need to have, obviously, 2 circulars, same size. That length. These are the Addy clicks, so they sort of click on and twist. All right. So instead of pulling the front, what I'm going to do now actually is just get rid of the loop. Haha, the loop is gone. I'm just going to knit onto this other needle. Let me just make sure. See, this is such a hydra, this cable. Make sure I'm not twisted. It's because the cable's so... There we go. All right. I'm going to knit onto the other needle. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. Look at this. This is... This is like wrestling with snakes here. All right. Couple of knits with the camel. Come on, camel. Couple of pearls with the gray. I mean, it's actually, if anything, probably going to be more confusing for me to have 2 needles, but you'll see. I won't have to wrestle with the cable so much. And actually, if I'm doing socks, I actually prefer using 2 circulars. You can knit both socks at the same time. I could get both sleeves going at the same time. I'm kind of just planning on knitting one to see if I like it, rather than going ahead and knitting both sleeves, deciding I don't like it, and having to pull them both apart. Okay. Wait, I accidentally knitted those 2. Gray is supposed to be a pearl, Kris. I've heard that is it the Chiagato? I think someone was telling me, Woburn was telling me, are the really good circulars that don't have the sort of problem with these plasticky cables is they curl up and they want to stay curled up, and that means they're constantly springing up in your way. Apparently there's new needles like the Chiagato that have like nylon cables that hang out of your way and get out of your way. So I might have to invest. My circulars are all a bit old. It will soon be clear what method is in my madness, don't worry. So I'm actually doing the one hand. I actually find the one hand, the corrugated ribbing, is not too bad. As long as you remember to constantly keep the arrangement of the two wools the same. So I'll do about 50 onto one needle and leave 50 onto the other. How many have I done? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40. About 10 more stitches. Then we'll be able to quit fighting with these snakes. Actually, I'll do 48 and 52. That way I can end on, oops, end on the gray here. Okay. Now, look what I have done. Let me spread this out so you can actually see it now. All right. This looks just like what we had before. Let me switch back to the ultra wide. So again, we've got 50 stitches on one needle and 50 stitches on the other, except now they truly are two separate circular needles, completely separate. So when I'm knitting with the front needle, I can literally leave the ends of the back needle just hanging there. So I'm going to knit the front needle, so I'm just going to pull that through. Make sure I'm knitting with the same end of the same circular needle. So follow it around and make sure I've got the ends of the one circular. This is where it can be good if you've got like one bamboo and one metal, because then you know you're not going to grab the wrong end. But look, so there's the tips of the back needle. They're just hanging there. And I've got everything on the front needle now. It's a little bit easier that way. All right. And then see, when I do this first one, I need to get the camel. I just want to, when I make the first two knits, I actually do sort of pull that first one just a little bit tighter than I normally would, because I'm trying to prevent it from creating a gap where the needles join. So don't be afraid to pull that, just the first two stitches at the start of each needle, just a little firmer. Now, unlike normal ribbing, corrugated ribbing does not pull in. You know, it doesn't, you know, normal ribbing at the cuffs of a garment is elastic, it stretches, it's boing boingy stretchy, and it'll pull in, but corrugated ribbing doesn't do that. So you just have to be aware of that. You know, pattern might have you knit the corrugated ribbing in, often you'll knit normal ribbing in a size smaller than the body, because it is stretchy. But with corrugated ribbing, it isn't. So if you knit it with a smaller needle, it will actually be a lot smaller. You might not be able to get it on. So I think the pattern tells you to do it in usually the normal size needle. What is this doing? Yeah, this actually has you do the corrugated in a slightly smaller size. I'm doing it in the same size. You can knit the corrugated ribbing in a smaller size needle. But it's not going to give you a cuff, as it were, not a stretchy ribbing cuff. It's more decorative than anything. I'm thinking I'll do Is that about an inch worth or so? Now you recall in the body of the jumper, I actually tweaked the number of stitches so that the motifs would fit evenly around it. I'm not bothering with that on the arms because, you know, the start and end of the row will be in the armpit anyway underneath, so I'm not really bothering. Okay, now onto the front needle. Come on, camel. These are the hoops we jump through to knit small circumferences. I mean, I could use double points, a set of double pointed straight needles, but I find that even more awkward, frankly. Would this fit around a 40 centimeter? I feel like it's too many stitches. I do have a 40 centimeter. Hang on. I do have a 40 centimeter cable. I'm gonna try that. Just use that and go around. Maybe I'll try that. All right, let's get to the end of this row, and I'll try getting it onto a single circular. I might have enough stitches to do it, actually. That'll be a lot less annoying. Ah, see what I did? I forgot to move the the wool to the back, or accidentally moved it to the front when I moved the gray. Get back there. Camel, gray, camel, I'm nearly to the end. Uh-oh. What happened at the end here? I have a camels ended up on the wrong side of the gray. I'm just going to move it to the back. That's where I was, yeah, twisted it when I was switching between needles. Okay, let's get rid of this. Is nonsense. All right, we're going to switch to a single short circular needle because nobody's got time for this. All right. I'm going to use my joiner honor here, technical term, and join on the short one. Yeah. And then let's just go ahead and pull that one through. Going to orient this octopus here. Okay. There. We now have the short needle. There's the working wool there. Let's just transfer these stitches because it's annoying the crap out of me. I'm just going to transfer everything onto one needle, one short needle, see if that works for our purposes. So I'm just sliding stitches from one circular onto the other. Should have just started with the 40. I wasn't thinking. If it's the upper part of the bicep, that should be enough to go around a 40 centimeter circular. Okay. Get rid of that. Show you what we now have. Yay! We now have all our stitches onto one needle. That was painful. Okay. And there's the working wool coming off the back. I'm writing it onto the front. So let's just go ahead and will they actually stretch all the way around? This is a problem with the circular. You have to have enough stitches to actually stretch all the way around the circle or it won't work. I think we have just enough. Oh, my Mac's running out of battery. Let me plug in. Run out of battery. Plugged in. Cool. All right. Look, it just stretches around. It's not ideal. What about twist up the gun? Okay. Doesn't really quite stretch all the way around. Still gonna magic loop it. It's annoying. Just pull enough slack so that I can get it's not long enough. It means I've got a magic loop. I hate it. to the longer one again. Do the 80 centimeter instead? Is that better? What was I using before? I was using the 60. Let's do it with the 80 and we'll magic loop. That's annoying. I hoped we would have enough. See how curly it is? See how springy and curly it is? Like I cannot get, and this one's even got like a grip in it. I cannot get it to straighten. Maybe if I just sort of really, I'm just sort of really kind of trying to pull it, trying to pull the kinks out of it. Still annoying. Okay. Just pull all these stitches onto the longer needle. What am I doing? The other way. That way. You turn in to watch me knitting and you just see me fighting with circular needles. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, 40 centimeter. You were not the answer to my problem. Maybe the 80 centimeters is. Okay. And we're now all kinds of twisted around. Just untie this unholy nightmare. There we go. All right, and then let's pull out a magic loop here. What do we have? What are you looking at? There you go. You're looking at 50% of the stitches. So I've got a magic loop pulled out. So I've just pulled out a loop halfway along on an 80 centimeters. Get half the stitches on one needle and half on the other. We're just gonna go with that because I've tried like 3 different solutions now. And this seems to be, this cable's still gonna curl up and annoy me, but whatever. All right, back to actual knitting content. So again, I'm going to pull that first stitch. I just pull that first one just a little extra tight because I don't want to get that ladder where we switch from needles. Back needle, front needle. Okay. And again, remembering when I purl, the wool goes to the front as it does normally when you're ribbing. It's just we happen to be doing it with 2 colors. Switch to the closer needle. Oh, somebody rated. Thanks, Fuzzy Loops. That's cool. That's really nice. I'm guessing with a name like Fuzzy Loops, it is knitting related, your stream. I'll have to check you out. Okay. This is the easiest of the ways so far than using the 60. So I tried using a 60 centimeter. I tried using 2 circulars. I tried using a single 40. And now we're back to the 80 centimeter with using the magic loop technique where I've basically just pulled out the excess cable. Knitting small circumference things is sometimes a pain. You crochet mostly. Oh, cool. I've done a very small amount of crochet. I think I did a very simple blanket. You know, of course, I've done a couple granny squares. But crochet is funny to me. Like, I feel like it uses a part of my brain that is like the other half of my brain or something. Because every time I crochet, I have to relearn it. It just doesn't stick the way that knitting sticks. And also, it's tricky because I grew up in America, but then lived the last 20 years in Australia. And Australian, and I'm sure you know this for people who don't, Australian and British crochet patterns use the same terms as in American patterns, but they mean different things, right? It's like a single crochet in one is actually a double in the other, or stuff like that. Which means if you're following you actually need to know what country the crochet pattern is from, the author, or you can actually quite screw it up. So that's why I don't do a lot of crochet. I mean, I like amigurumi, you know, I think it's great for making it like stuffies and things like that. But yeah, have never gotten into it the way I have with knitting. All right, so I'm just gonna fight with the cables some more. Okay. I'm knitting from, again, working wool coming off the back needle. Gonna knit the front needle. And you sort of keep reciting that mantra, you'll be fine. Let me start with the camel. Again, first stitch, pull it a little tighter than normal, just to close up the ladder there. So I'm kind of, those of you who don't know, I'm making a Fair Isle sweater called Orkney. Actually, it was a Rowan pattern, and the original pattern was a cardigan. I started knitting this cardigan like 7 years ago. Knitted the body with steeks, you know, so I was going to cut it. So I knitted it as a tube, the body up to the shoulders, intending to cut the fronts and cut the armholes and then realized that it was way, way too small. So I shoved it in a bag for 7 years. As you do. And it was my New Year's resolution this year to actually deal with it. So I took it out. I stared at it and tried it on many times, trying to think if I could actually make that thing fit. And yeah, no. So I frogged it. Frogged the whole thing, wound it into skeins, washed them, reballed it up, and started over. And so I'm knitting it. So I've been working on the body for the last few weeks on the stream. And so I'll show you. I actually finished the body yesterday. I did 3 needle cast off, and this is what it looks like. So that was yesterday afternoon. I tried it on. So still got a ton of ends to weave in the middle. It's not blocked, which is why you can tell the bottom half is kind of baggier, because I used a bigger needle on the bottom half and then switched to a tighter needle about halfway up my waist. I think a wash and a block will sort of even that out. But the question then is, what do I do with the sleeves? You know, do I leave it as a vest and just finish the armholes and the neck? That's still an option. Do I do a full-on long sleeve? Do I do a short sleeve? So I put it up on Facebook yesterday, and a bunch of my friends weighed in. And a few people suggested a little cap sleeve. And I thought, you know what? I could actually try that out, see what it looks like, and not have invested too much time. So that's what I'm knitting today. I'm actually knitting a small little cap sleeve that I will sew into the armholes there. And so that's what this is going to be. I'm doing a small bit of the corrugated ribbing at the base of the sleeve. And then I'll do a sleeve cap. And so I'm kind of making it up, because the original pattern obviously was for a long sleeve. It's written flat, and I've converted this whole thing to be knitted in the round. So I'm really just kind of stealing the charts, and beyond that, I'm making the rest of it up. But if this sleeve doesn't work out, I can always take it off and go back to it as a vest. I guess the question is, how much cuff do I do for the sleeve? Just gonna kind of eyeball it. You made affiliate. Congrats. Very nice. Yeah, I just hit affiliate a few weeks back as well. Yeah. Hadn't kind of expected that. I really only stream on the weekends. Just because I sit here at the same seat all week working. I can't sit here anymore and they work weekday evenings. All right, so I get to the end of the row. I pull my stitches along so I can look at my... See, then there's my corrugated ribbing taking shape. So it's really cool. And you can see because I did that knit row for the first row of the gray, I don't get... Otherwise, I'd have gotten a little blip of the camel, which would have looked ugly. So it actually looks much nicer if you do that trick of making the first row all knits. Okay, let's do a few more rows of this. Let's do a few more rounds. Okay, this 80 centimeter magic loop is working much better than any of the other techniques I was trying. Okay, do my 2 knits. And just a little extra tug on the knits, that first 2 stitches. The other trick you can do to avoid ladders is sort of keep redistributing your stitches so that the join, the gap, isn't always in the same place. That can help too. If you always get ladders and you're not having any luck not having ladders. Oh, thanks for the follow, Elizara. Is this all crocheters watching me now? Have any knitters? If you have any questions, just put them in the chat. Hey, Lean Mean Knitting Machine, how are you? Good to see you. Oh, I should show you guys my other new toy. Had so much fun with this week. So I got a couple jumpers, like this one I'm wearing. This is called Road to Golden. It's a Fair Isle I knitted many years ago in 8-ply. It's really nice and soft, but it had a bunch of pills. You know, wool gets kind of pilly. And so I went and I bought, I've got a couple of those sweater shavers, the little electric ones you buy in the craft shop, and they're crap. They all die. I've gone through like 2 or 3 of them. So I went on Amazon and I paid like 30 euros for this ridiculous wool shaver. Like, it's a monster. And it comes with like 2 extra razor blade spinning devices, and you charge it up with USB. And so then I spent like 2 hours on my knitting last week just shaving it, and you guys, it felt so great. Like, let me give you an example. Like, here was the Lenatus that I made. And I only finished this like like a month ago? And on the left, you can see it was already starting to pill in the underarm area from the friction. And on the right is what it looked like after I shaved it. And it was